It's another episode, a special episode this time of TSibs interviews. And tonight, as you see, we're calling it A Bog's Life. Hi, everyone, TSibs with you. And in a little bit, once his game is done, we're going to hear from Dead Soul Rising, who is one of our Bogs here on the site. But right now, we are joined by another one of the couple of brave souls who wants to do this job, and that is Birthday Machine, who is now with us. How's it going today, dude?
Pretty good now that, like I was saying, I finally got that baby to sleep. 3 minutes ago, screaming baby in my arms, but fortunately the wife's cool about it and took over.
So far, you know, we're in season 2 now for PSN. Talk a little bit about your experience with LG, how you got involved initially, and then, you know, what made you decide to get involved in such a way in the position of a Bog. Talk about first how you got involved with LG, though.
Okay, well, this goes way back to the VHL days. It's probably years ago at least. The now defunct VHL, and that's kind of where I met McDonald and Haji and all these other.
Right.
I kind of came into it a couple years as a GM. Then I jumped up to, I believe it was CHL commissioner. So I was in charge of the whole CHL down there. Through a set of weird circumstances, I ended up finishing the season as the top guy. McDonald kind of stepped out at this point. His replacement also stepped out. And so here I am, I think my third season in, and I'm holding the highest position. And I am terrified, right? Yeah. You're so intimidated going into that. You're nobody, and you're trying to tell these NHLers, you know, how to run the league and what they've done wrong. So that was kind of how I got started doing staff work. Coming back to this, I had some friends who kind of told me, "Oh, LG is the league to get into now." So this was on Xbox, on the VHL. So over on PlayStation, I kind of stepped in. I wanted to be just a player, just a normal guy, but I could not help myself. I saw there was an opening there for me, and I ran with it.
So did you play for any extent of time just as a player before getting involved with management with LG?
No, I haven't played a single day as just a player. Day one, I was a GM in the CHL until now.
Wow. And I think that's kind of odd, isn't it? I mean, I don't think we tend to get that kind of situation that often here in the league. I think guys tend to want to try it out. I know Maranaconda obviously was one of those guys. So somebody had to be GM and AGM in season 1, and so we have guys like Moran who stepped in right away and were management. For somebody who is just starting out in the league, you know, is that a wise move for them to make? Should they get involved with management right away? Is it something that they should ease into, you know, for lack of, you know, needing owners? You know, obviously the CHL could use some more owners now for next season, but is that typically the way you would suggest somebody get involved?
If you're the right type of person, you won't be able to resist, right?
Right.
I had tons of spreadsheets and stats on stuff. This was even before I started in any kind of league. And that was kind of how I got into it. Is the owner came to me and he said, "You got to come play this. Go buy an Xbox and join up." Because I was just that type of personality. I had to track stuff. I had to keep it organized. And I think those kind of people, if you can read and understand the Constitution, you do a lot of on-the-job learning. But if you're the right personality, for sure, day one, go for it.
So obviously there are differences, and we're going to hopefully talk to Dad. He'll be on soon, I'm guessing. There are differences, obviously, with all different types of things that you can do within this league. You could be an owner, you can be a GM and an AGM, and we'll talk more about what you guys feel, is the responsibility of those positions, and for anybody who's going to get involved in it in the future, what they should expect in those positions. But, you know, for what you guys do, you know, you hear a lot of, you must hear a ton of bitching and complaining constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And so that cannot be, you know, I think it almost makes you in a way, you're sort of like a policeman. You're there for the good, but you're going to get yelled at a lot of times by a lot of
Mostly.
people.
Yeah, you never hear when you make a good decision. At best, you get a thanks. For the most part, it's only the complaints. And I like your analogy of a policeman, right? This is something I've kind of always believed, right? You're driving down the road. What's to stop you from swerving into the other lane or to running through a stop sign? It's nothing really. It's just words, just lines, just paint on the road or a light above you. And that's how I see a lot of the management in this league, right? There's nothing to stop you from breaking these rules, but there's consequences. And I'm kind of the guy who has to step in and inform you of these consequences. And a lot of the time it's not very fun. But then you look back at this intersection that they've just blown through the stop sign and you see 29 other cars having no problem, right? And so a lot of the time, the complaints that we get is just through their own ignorance of the rules or frustration through being caught. They always feel like I always hear consistency. We want you guys to be consistent. And then when we catch someone, it's suddenly not about consistency. It's about their special case, yeah, no, it wasn't my fault. It was this weird set of circumstances, and sometimes it is. And, there is the appeals process for that, right?
Right.
And a lot of the time, things do come up, and we take a second look, and McDonald there, who handles the appeals, will just set things straight, right? So there's always a second chance to catch anything that we may have missed.
So, you talk about Brody McDonald and obviously Tristan, the guys who really oversee everything that goes on here. Talk to me about the kind of support that you get from them. What types of things do they do to help you out with a lot of this decision making? Does it eventually come down to a committee of people, or do they leave you on your own for the most part with a certain guideline that they're comfortable with your level of knowledge on it?
Yeah, Brody is an awesome leader because he leaves us alone for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't step in. He doesn't get involved in the day-to-day or anything. But when we need a question answered, when we need clarification on something, he's the guy to go to, right? What we like to do is follow the letter of the rule, try to find past examples. And what I actually do is I'm constantly talking to the commission, the BOGs over on Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure out how do they do it, because you guys have been doing it for 23 seasons. I know a lot of those guys from years ago, and so they're a great resource for me, because stuff that is new to us or stuff that maybe the PlayStation guys haven't really gotten to the meat of,
mm-hmm.
they've seen it a million times, right? So I just use all these resources. I go to Brody if I need something, if I clarified, if I need something on the website kind of fixed, I go to Triz. But, and maybe this is just my own stubbornness, I try not to go to them as much as possible. I try to, handle things on my own, and if it really needs to be escalated, I will send it up to them. But I figure they get so much contact in a day that my job is kind of to be a buffer between them, right?
Right. So now we'll continue on with the show, but joining us now, Dead Soul Rising finished with his game for the night, and we just started off here with a few basic questions with Birthday and what he's been up to. Talk to us a little bit about how you started out with LG. Rob talked about the fact that he's pretty much been in management in one way, shape, or form from the beginning when he first started playing in LG. Talk to us about how you started and how you got involved in helping out League Gaming in general.
Last season I signed up and was a little bit late for the tryouts. So I saw that there was a lot of people that were looking for some management positions, and so I signed up for that. And I guess one of the managers was interested in having me, so I basically took ownership or the GM position of the Rochester Americans. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got involved last season. So that was quite the learning curve overall to start out that way. I kind of just jumped right in, got my feet wet right off the bat, and there's definitely a lot to learn, and it was a good experience. I mean, there was definitely the ups and downs, but yeah, it was pretty good.
Let's talk a little bit about the responsibilities of being a GM. I mean, obviously, you guys have to deal with management of all teams constantly. talk a little bit about what is expected out of a GM. You guys have experience in this area. Talk to me about the responsibilities of a GM. The scouting, making trades, all the the day-to-day scheduling, all that kind of work. Um, you know, Talk about how much of a challenge that is, because I really want people to understand that if they're going to get involved in management, that they know what they're getting themselves into. The rewarding part of it, and of course the challenges of it as well. I'll start with you, Rob, first about what does a league expect out of a GM of a team?
Oh, what does the league expect is kind of to understand the rules. But I kind of want to point to something you said is the day-to-day, and that is the challenge of the GM, right?
Right.
The owner can set the expectations for the GM whatever they want. If they say, I just want you to put games together each night, that's fine. But if the owner wants to give them a little more latitude, that's cool too. And it's kind of the expectations of a GM or whatever the owner sets on them. And
Right.
set of responsibilities there.
Okay. Your turn, Dad. What do you see as the the main focal point of the GM? What does he really need to get down pat and to do his job properly?
I'd say communication is probably one of the most important things. Basically, communicating with everybody involved in the organization, from the owner to the AGMs to all the people on TC, especially. Just be outgoing and just make sure to be in touch with everybody at all times. I think the more that you have everybody on the same page, the more that everybody knows and understands the rules, what's expected of them, game nights, how to schedule themselves. I think it just ultimately it helps everyone out in the long run, and it's definitely a tasking thing because there's a lot of people who just sign up randomly and maybe forget about it or not really understand the kind of how in depth it can be and how much responsibility is actually on that person to go and schedule themselves and to make sure that if they schedule themselves for that date that they actually show up for that time. There's definitely a lot of issues with that. I know I had that last season for sure. Most of my team was made up of TC guys that I had to just kind of get in touch with and make things happen. So I know that still happens, and I think that's something that people just the GMs can only do so much. But if you're a player signing up, definitely do your part. Go read the rules, just at least have an idea of what's expected in the league and what you can and can't do. But certainly help your team out by helping the GM just be involved, get in touch with them. Communication number one, I think.
What? Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you tell? I mean, what would you tell a GM who is trying to, obviously, I've seen this with our GM, and I've seen it across the league. You see it in the chat box every so often. Guys who are saying, "Hey, I'm wasting away down here in the training camp. No one's giving me a chance. What do I have to do? How do I quit?" All these different things that come up. And what do you say as a GM? How do you get these guys involved? What do you do to keep their interest up, or to at least gauge what their interest is first before committing anything to these guys? How do you go about that in an effective way as a GM?
That's really, really the ultimate question. I think everybody deals with that differently. Um, it's definitely a tough one to answer, but I'd say for me personally, I just went out of my way to contact everyone and let them know what's expected. Let them know that I would hold some tryouts or some, basically some drop-in games just to see how everybody plays together, build some chemistry, and so really it comes down to the player being involved themselves. As long as they get back to you, and as long as you give them some sort of medium to try and play the game, I think it'll give some people more interest. But if they're just sitting on there on the TC and they're not getting contacted, or maybe they're just not looking at LG website, whatever the case may be, I mean, again, it's on them to do their part. So the best thing GMs can do is to just try and hold some drop-ins. I know a lot of GMs do that for sure. There's quite a few that do this already, but just be as active as possible and make sure that as a player you have the responsibility to reach out to the GMs and owners and to your team. So just go into your team chats, message your players and see if you can just do some drop-ins on the side.
Go ahead, Rob. What do you have?
I was gonna say, kind of counter to what Dead Soul is saying. There's got to be a critical mass, man. Because I'm looking at the rosters now, I've seen 55, 53, for an AHL GM, 60 players for your, almost 60 for the Hershey Bears.
Right.
That's impossible. You can't talk to everyone. You're crazy. There has to be, either some guys that you just accept that you can't talk to. That's outside of your sphere of how many people you can possibly communicate and keep interested.
Absolutely. No, you're right for sure. And I mean, I don't have all the answers by all means. I don't have really the answer for that. I know that the league is trying to expand for next season, especially in the CHL. I think that's really going to be the critical point of being able to have extra teams to really get everybody involved as much as possible. But again, that comes down to having the right people stepping up to manage and own those teams and get everybody involved that way. So the more people we have coming up and getting together to just take that responsibility, the more I think we'll have chances for people to actually play in this league.
You guys are listening to A Bog's Live here on YouTube, on the YouTube channel for LeagueGaming.com. I've got Birthday Machine and Dead Soul Rising. Let's continue on with that topic just for a little bit longer. So we can expand further in the CHL, obviously, and the question is quality versus quantity, and what's the balance? Now we need more. How badly do we need them? Do we get in guys just because we need bodies to run these teams, or do the quality and sacrifice some of the extra teams we could throw out there? Is there a balance that can be reached for something like that?
Totally. Before we came into this season, we did interviews with CHL owners, and we got guys who were solid. I think we lost 2 this season. Owners for 2 teams, which is pretty awesome for first season CHL. We came in, I think, with 16 teams. And really, we had 14, and then at the 11th hour, we said, let's throw in 2 more because we have so many guys in training camp. If we wanted to do 30, we could have just plugged 30 guys in there, but it's such a headache when a team falls apart. It's awful, and surprisingly, you almost always see someone on the team step up. Someone's willing to take the challenge. But it gets harder and harder the more teams are falling apart, and the further down the season you go, the lower in the standings they are. Who wants to take over the 15th, 16th place team? Which I think in the CHL right now, you got the Guelph Storm. They fell apart. They bombed. They're second last in the league. Their owner quit. And you know what? 2 guys have stepped up, and I'm super impressed already with what they're able to do. And they just emerged out of the ether, right? There was a void. Nature abhors a vacuum. And they found it.
So you're saying, we go with who we get with, and eventually we're going to have those good people rise. And I think we're already seeing that after season 1 into season 2 of the AHL. I think we already kind of see that. So I think I agree with your opinion on that, and I think that may very well be what happens with the CHL. We certainly need more guys to step in and do that.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping after this season we'll see more applicants, right? Because a lot of guys, I think going into this season, going into season 2, they were saying, well, I'm going to make the NHL, so why do I want to be a CHL owner? So we saw weak numbers of guys signing up. Suddenly there's a little more interest in being a CHL owner, so suddenly that's a little more appealing. They said, well, but maybe I'll make the AHL, and I think in the last week, more and more guys started coming forward, and we suspected they would. We hoped they would, and I'm really happy with the crop that did end up taking CHL ownership and management.
Do we think we're heading to the full 60 team, or are we anywhere near that for PSN?
Like 30 CHL teams?
Or was it 30? I thought actually in Xbox you had more than that.
They do. Sorry, I thought you meant full 90 teams, as in expanding to 30 teams, which is kind of what my personal...
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Okay. Let's get back to some of the typical questions that some of the things we always hear when we talk about game activity and what happens out there. And we'll go back to a little bit about what you guys have gone through over the last few years. But as far as what you guys wind up having to do in this position, there's definitely a different workload on you guys compared to what other management has to do, and a lot more work, obviously, investigation work that you have to do when there's a complaint. So talk to me a little bit more about what you guys do day to day, week to week, how you work as a committee. But typically, what do you guys do every week that maybe most of us who play don't really see happening behind the scenes?
That's all you want that?
Well, I can say comparing to a GM role, I mean, there's definitely similarities with the workload, but the workload is a little bit more, I'd say, mostly with the investigating that we have to do. We have a lot of complaints that come in throughout the week. Some of them we do right away. Some of them we have to wait for the end of the week to actually do at the end of Thursday. Once we get these complaints, we have to take a look at everything involved, all the players, make sure that the complaint is legit, and just kind of look at what's involved with it. It usually takes, yeah, I can't say really what the average time is for each one, but it's all very unique depending on the situation. Um, but it's certainly, there's definitely, like, we know that the leagues, we're representing the league, everybody's watching, so you have to be very careful as to how you go about doing these things and make sure that you word things properly. And number one, make sure that you get everything right in terms of the Constitution. And that can be pretty, daunting to, we're always constantly worried about making mistakes. And, we all definitely communicate with each other through Skype and other PMs to be able to kind of have each other chime in on, what to do with the situation if we're unsure, or maybe, we all have different views based on how, the situation is, what it is, how it's going. So we all really rely on each other to help each other out in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's definitely a bit of a workload, but it helps, to get the league running smoothly and to hold people and ourselves accountable. And it's definitely uh, quite the experience so far.
Just to, sorry, just to add into something that what Deadsoul was saying is trying to get everything right, right? We're handling, I've counted before, about 120 to 180 PMs a day back and forth between different players,
Wow.
management. We're handling about 50, 60 complaints in a normal week. And people expect us to do that flawlessly, right? No
Right.
mistakes. We can't say, oh, yeah, you can play this guy, and then he plays the game, and suddenly it turns out he's not valid, right? We cannot give out bad information. So you're expecting us to handle 700 decisions with no mistakes in a week. And I think for the most part, we pretty much get it. And the odd time that we might not get it, I try to loop back right away and get it straightened out, right?
Yeah. And I
I mean,
mean, like, that's not even including some of the private messages that we get from people individually. A lot of people will reach out to us on an individual basis for whatever reasons, and we definitely try to get in touch with everybody equally. And I mean, when that happens, we just go based on what we have time to do. We're not going to, like, favor anybody at all. It's just we're doing things as fast as we can, but also, number one, as correctly as we can.
so typically, what this is going to be a loaded question. Typically, what's the response that you get back when you explain to the players, or I guess you're getting in most of the complaints from management. When you get those complaints come in, you come back with a decision that's not favorable to them, and you give them the explanation. Do most people understand it? Do they get it? Or do they think that you're not understanding what they're coming to you with? How does that typically play out with the complaints?
Handing out bad decisions, especially, you know what, we're arguing with people on the internet, and we want to be the ones who are right, and we are usually demonstrably right, right?
Right.
We can point, and we kind of maybe get some flack for this for too often replying with just straight quotes from the Constitution to a PM, because we're just trying to not use our words, not word things in our way. We're saying this is the rule that we follow, this is the rule you broke, and that's hopefully the end of the debate. And I would say 60 to 70% of them, they'll come back unhappy. They'll say some terrible things about us, whatever. The good 30% are the ones that you try on to, and the bad 60 are the ones that you just say, you know what, it's just a video game, and I'm the guy who tells people sometimes that maybe I'm sorry you can't play your game this week, and then I go outside and I drive around and I say, what do I even care? Why do I care that he's sad that I told him he can't play his video game? What is this? What is life? It's yeah. I have an existential crisis once or twice a week at least.
Yeah, that cannot be obviously. You like we were talking a little bit earlier, Rob, and Dead Cell wasn't here for it. You're sort of like policemen, and so to a lot of them look like a necessary evil, but they understand. I think that you need to be there. I often wonder if the mentality of the gamer, it's one thing when you're at your place of work and if you're managing people and you ask them to do things that they understand where it's coming from and they try to make sure that they are, you know, under, figuring out what you're talking about and doing the right thing. I think sometimes maybe with the mindset of the game, or at least from my perspective, they kind of feel like you played plenty of games, you know how it is. Guys will throw the puck the opposite direction, and they think that the game is screwing them. And I got to believe that's still the same. It's the same kind of, thought process too when, when you don't come down in a favorable decision for them. I wonder if it's a bit of the gamer mentality that says, well, I know what I think is right, and that's what should be it. And so you're always battling that. I'm guessing that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I think you've nailed that pretty well. That's
Well,
pretty much, yeah.
Dead Soul, I know you and I talked earlier this season. Is we always see or often see, the 5 stages of grief. You know this,
Oh, yeah.
Sibs?
You definitely see that.
You've got look at it right now, denial. So teams will say, "I didn't break the rule." That's ridiculous. Anger comes towards us. Bargaining, where they'll try to say, "Well, we didn't actually do it, and maybe we just let us off with a warning this time." Depression, and then of course finally acceptance.
Yeah.
If we're lucky, we can get through those in a day and move past the PM.
So, obviously another bigger part of this too is you could have people that you deal with who are perfectly, hey, you know what, that makes sense to me. I'm glad we had this discussion. And like you said, you got to have people who are going to go off the deep end and, hope that something horrible happens to you. How do you deal with these different types of personalities and attitudes? And at times, I'm sure you're dealing with disrespect as well from some of these players. And I, there's a certain amount of anger that comes to the forefront with some of these guys. How do you deal with that? What do you say to them to try and get them back on the same page with you?
Well, for me personally, it's you just got to let that kind of be brushed aside, even though that there's anger directed at you in a way. I don't take it personally. Sometimes it's just you get frustrated because they don't understand, and all they need to do is just read the rules again and really kind of try to understand for themselves. But I know that sometimes it can be a little difficult. Some rules are written a little in a way that's even for me, I have to go to birthday sometimes and be, oh, is it saying this or is it saying that? Just want to make sure that my point of view is correct. So, I get that that's going to happen, period. It's going to happen with people regardless. And for me, it's just a matter of reminding myself that, you're just there to help kind of like, as you say, police and get these rules right and make sure that you understand them well enough to be able to rule on them. But with these different personalities, you just got to kind of take it in stride and I usually just will quote the Constitution and try to be as respectful to them so that, when they respond to me, maybe they'll realize that, hey, I'm just trying to help them out. Or sometimes I'm just trying to get them to see what they're doing wrong, but it's nothing personal on their end, nothing personal on mine. But it's difficult for sure. There's a lot of people with a lot of different varying personalities, and most of the time, yeah, we do get a lot of angry people. But I think in the end, people start to understand and they realize that we are just there to try and help, and it's what helps get things running smoothly in the league overall.
For sure. You know what? I think if I didn't have conviction in the things that I was doing and saying, I couldn't do it. If I just thought I was just full of it, and just being a jerk or power tripping, there's no way I could continue to do this. It would just weigh way too heavily on me. It would just be too much. So just having total conviction that you will be right, the truth will out, and you'll at the end of the day, you know what? I've had people who are so angry at me in a private message, and then we'll talk a day later, and it's fine. It's just water under the bridge. They've reached that fifth stage of grief of acceptance, and we move past it. Like almost unequivocally, I can't think of more than a person or two who would still hold a grudge against me.
Yeah, and I think that's the majority of the situations, because people do realize at the end of the day it is a game, and how much emotional investment do you really need to put into it to make your day sour, just getting angry about something like that. So I think all people end up coming around in the end, and they just realize, yeah, not really worth the emotion.
You guys are listening to A Bog's Life here on the YouTube channel for LeagueGaming.com. I'm TSibs, and with me to talk about everything that a bog has to do and other things that come up are Birthday Machine and Dead Soul Rising. Let's talk more about the rules and what's going on in season 2. Only in their second season. There are going to be plenty of players who are not used to the League Gaming rules. Obviously, plenty of players have come over from the Xbox side to play, but still the majority are guys who are strictly PlayStation 4 guys. So, this league hasn't had the kind of seasoning that the Xbox side has had, including a better understanding of the rules. How do you think from Season 1 to Season 2 that the typical players and management have been able to adapt to these rules? Are they getting it? Do they understand it? Are they getting better at following the letter of the law in those rules that are set out on the website?
I think they're so much better, and they're better every season. But have you ever heard of this thing? It's called the Pareto principle.
I have not.
Okay, so it's that for many events, 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes.
80-20, sure, okay.
Yeah, so always you're going to have 80% of your work come from 20% of the people, regardless of their general understanding of the rules and what have you. So, yes, the rules have been better understood, but you've always got these 20% that are eating up 80% of your time. And that has been true as long as I've been doing this, which is probably my 5th season now, I guess. There's always the guys, most of them are great, most of them do their jobs, and they follow the rules, and it's perfect, and we barely get any complaints or problems from them. You get the 20%, that there will always be people who don't have enough time to invest, and they fall behind, and you do need to invest a lot of time to be management in this league. Or you'll get maybe the guys who care too much, who really try to exploit things, exploit the loopholes, and they are the worst. They're the absolute worst kind of people for the league, who really push the limits of what you could do. They push the limits of players' rights, and they're just awful. So terrible to deal with. I can't even express how frustrated. Very dedicated. They put in too much time into it, more time than I'm able to stay on top of them. Well, I might catch them 5 weeks down the road after doing something shady, and it's kind of like, well, what can I do? And so, just to loop back to your original question, the understanding is definitely better than it was from Season 1 to Season 2, and it'll keep improving like that. And as you get guys who return or they're in multiple seasons, the rules become just more colloquially known, right? It's not, we're not having to look up the rules every time. It's just guys know that this is the rule and that's the rule, and leave it alone, right? I think so many players never even take the time to read the Constitution. You just play and you talk in the game, and somebody in your party will say, "Hey, they can't dive like that in the offensive zone," and now you know.
I'm thinking actually that one of the things that you see and has been a bit of a complaint for players is are things that are hard to prove. We've talked a little bit about this. I know Dead and I talked a little bit the other day about it, and wanted to bring it to air about the types of things, the kinds of complaints that are coming in, and we'll talk more in depth about specific ones, but the burden of proof has to be the toughest thing to do. Obviously a lot of guys are streaming, and so that's one way to have some proof of what has happened or transpired during the game. But there are some things that happen that it's awfully hard to ever prove that somebody is doing something shady in a certain area. And I guess that has to probably be one of the tougher things you have to deal with, is be able to tell somebody, look, that may be the case. What you're saying could very well have happened, but how do you expect us to prove that? And your proof doesn't really show that. So I mean, I think that's probably, I'm thinking that's one of the bigger issues that you guys have, is people think they have proof that really doesn't qualify to really prove somebody out as cheating or doing something illegal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our hands are tied based on whatever people are coming to us with. We do need to have picture proof of things, that people are saying something or doing something particular that can be captured on a picture, or specifically video in-game things. Like if people come to us with complaints that something happened in a game, if we weren't involved in that and there's no video of it, then there's no way of us being able to confirm and verify anything to do with that. So ultimately, those kind of complaints, we can't typically process them unless there's something substantially there for us to look at. And sometimes people will think there's something that was against the rule, but they just, they might be incorrect about it, of course. But yeah, our hands are pretty tied. People just need to make sure that they take the right kind of photo evidence, and that's really what we have to work with, other than what a few things people can tell us. But again, people can lie and embellish, and that's why we just have to be strict with the kind of evidence that's brought to us, and what it is exactly.
Oh, and they will lie.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's horrifying. I hate these people.
Well, and obviously, like you said, there are going to be people who are going to be belligerent about anything. They're not going to understand the rules properly. Do you feel like what's out there right now as far as documentation for the rules, do you think that is something that is still a work in progress, that might need to be formatted in a way that might make more sense to the player, or do you think it's okay now? It's just a matter of compliance and people getting out there and actually reading it?
Oh, it's definitely the latter.
Yeah.
I will say it's not cleanly written. It's not user friendly to read through. But going back to something I said before, most guys won't read through it no matter what. Like, it is worded
Right.
almost perfectly. Grammatical errors aside, it's almost flawless for any issue that ever comes up, which is amazing that it is in so few words, really, because it's Article 2, 3, and 4 that is all we ever look at, which is maybe 20,000 words, if that. And it's just, more learning just comes from in-game stuff. It comes from just talking to people, from hearing, oh, Providence got nailed for this or for that, and then you learn that you can't do it. And I think in the playoffs last season, I
Right.
mentioned Providence specifically, that they got basically knocked out for not following the rules, and whether it was ignorance or malice is hard to say. But you know what? There was a huge explosion in the chat box after that happened. After I think it was 2 or 3 games got overturned. And it actually gave Hartford a chance to come back and end up winning the Calder, play for Game 7. And all this chatter that went down, and some of the staff, they wanted to get into it. They said, "Oh, we could prove that they're wrong. We can get into the chat box to really make them look like a bunch of jerks." And I kept telling them, "Stay out of it. Let everyone get involved, get angry, and then look up the rules to prove each other wrong." And it so worked. It was so good watching them. I watched for hours that night, watching them argue and slowly learn. It was just beautiful.
So I'm, obviously experience is going to make a difference for a lot of these folks. They're going to get used to the rules, and they're going to hopefully follow things the way they're supposed to be followed. But let's get back to what I was alluding to earlier, which is things that are happening now. Obviously, for a while, people have complained and whined and moaned about lag, and it's Sony, it's the PlayStation system, it's NHL and EA Sports. There are excuses left and right as to why things don't go right during a game. This year, I think we're getting a lot of people who are starting to now think, and I think I've been hearing a lot of this in seeing it in the chat in the last couple of weeks about people, quote unquote, lagging out because they want to switch the momentum. And again, that's a situation where how do you prove that? There are legitimate lag outs. We had a game just recently where one of the guys on the other team lost power. How did I know that wasn't that was the truth? Because honestly, he's one of the better guys on the team, and so and I believe him I also believe him because I have a lot of trust in him, but I know he's one of the better players. So that one to me is crystal clear. Why would a guy like that lag out? But you get a lot of these complaints now. How do you wind up? And I know we talked about it a little bit before, but how do you wind up dealing with something that is so hard to prove? You go back and look at some games just to try and see if there is a pattern going on? I mean, I don't know what else you really can do. You can't go back and look at a game and say, hey, someone lagged out, so they should lose. But do you try and maybe do a little bit of digging to see, does this team constantly do it? Does this line? Is this one or two guys always involved in this? Is there any kind of investigation going on like that for situations like what we're hearing now?
Well, I personally haven't seen too many of those kind of complaints coming in. I know I've heard about things like that. I've had people who have private messaged me and asked me, hey, what to do in this situation, or this is always happening with this one team. Every single time they're lagging out or something like that's going on. There's not really a way for us to determine if that's the case. I mean, that's a lot of digging if we're going to try and look at every single situation that's like that.
Right.
And it's tough. It's tough because you don't know. And I mean, I don't see it as a prevalent issue enough where people are complaining to the point where it's clogging up the complaint center there. But it's definitely something that we're aware of. And I mean, ultimately, ever since the updates happened, they don't seem to be quite as frequent. So that's why when things like this happen, it does raise some questions and some eyebrows.
Right. And go ahead.
If I can add on to this.
Like you said.
Sure.
Lagging out.
There you go.
We enforce
You
the
there,
rules.
Rob?
We don't make them up.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about again what we're doing so far after season 2. How do you we got one more week left to go. How do you see how season 2 has gone so far as incidents, as far as compliance from players and cooperation from the owners and GMs and AGMs? How do you think this has gone in season 2 compared to what you wind up having to deal with in season 1?
It's gone awesome. I love everyone. And I don't even, that didn't mean to sound so facetious. So I came in about halfway through season 1, and not to say anything bad against the staff that was in place, but it was very permissive. And Haji and myself came in from Xbox, from a place that was very authoritarian, and he is a military guy, and he's very authoritarian. And that's something that I can work with. That's something I can get behind. So we kind of came in, and it was like walking into the barracks where there's a couple of guys playing dice in the corners, just towels laying around. And we said, "What the hell is going on here? We got to clean this up." And from what I walked into then to what it is now, it's like we've got a regiment, and they're marching so nicely. They sing those beautiful songs. It's great. I think so many of the management are so tight right now. And there may have been some resistance. People may still call us jerks for for kind of being too hardcore on the rules, but I think it's given a structure for the guys who do read and understand how to do things properly. It's given them that structure to kind of grow and do their thing and play it right?
We are having a discussion here with a couple of LG BOGs, Birthday Machine and Dead Soul Rising. This is A Bog's Life, a special interview show here on YouTube, on the LeagueGaming.com YouTube channel. And we're going to just talk a little bit more about the future here in the time we've got remaining. It's going to be a little while before Season 3 and the new release of NHL 17. I want to talk a little bit about the new game and what types of things you guys will do to prepare for that. But before we even talk about the game, with the time between the two seasons, and we'll start with you, Dead. The time between the two seasons, the 2 and 3, what types of things are you guys doing to prepare for the next season? Do you guys have postseason discussions about how things went? Do you go over rulings? Do you look at rules again and maybe make suggestions? Talk about what you guys do in the off season.
Well, so far we're still pretty focused on this season, but we have already started things like constitution fixes. We found a few sections that's that might be a little contradictory, or that might be maybe could be beefed up a little bit. So that's one major thing that we've been looking at, and we've been doing this all season, just adding to that. Just trying to flesh out, see the interest with people, and see if we can try and get some more. We I mean, ultimately we're still pretty focused on this season. So I mean, I guess maybe Birthday might be able to chime in a little bit better for that. But yeah, that's what's going on so far.
What we do in the off season? Is that that's the question?
Yeah.
Well, so this is a weird one too, right? Because I want to say there's a month and a half or so, not enough time for a full season between the end of this season and NHL 17.
Mm-hmm.
So Dead Soul knows about this better than I do, but I believe there's some tournament that we're going to be doing, a World Cup, maybe. Dead
I'm
Soul?
not. You know what? I'm not too familiar with that myself.
Yeah,
I've just been pretty much
yeah.
focused on what we're doing so far, and trying to kind of see what's happening for next season. I guess for me, just focusing on right now, and finishing up what we got going on here.
Okay, so there's this is an atypical off season, but hopefully for the start of next season we'll be going a little bit quicker. But it's also a little weird because the website handles Xbox and it handles PlayStation, and you got Brody at the top doing both. It benefits him to have our seasons a little bit staggered,
Right.
and I'm not sure if that's going to continue into 17 because this is the first year on PlayStation. But I can see just the website load during bidding is really hard, and just the workload on him as things come down. It might. I'm not going to speak for him. It might stay staggered like that. So I don't know what the actual timeline will be for PlayStation going into 7. I've got millions and millions of notes, but it's specifically one that gives us a full timeline, one that I made starting at Season 2, that every day I would write down, what we did. Like, we picked owners. This day we had owners confirmed by. This day AHL GMs. This is when NHL bidding started. Everything. Every little action that we did. Every informative post that we sent out. So it is all lined up. And I'm trying to build a structure. And we've got a whole blog office that kind of I am 98% of the posts in there, and I try to make that my legacy, right? If I ever got to step away, that somebody will be able to pick that up, right? Hopefully we can slot new staff in and keep things very consistent and flowing like that.
Yeah, he's definitely creating the foundation of a structure that we can follow for people who are coming in and wanting to be bogs next year, or staff members and things like that. Or so basically that's the main focus right now on our part. I guess we kind of wait to hear down the line what is going to happen afterwards. We'll work on certain things, and of course, some new people will be appointed, some people will stay. So being a BOG, we're mainly in charge of the rulings of in-game infractions, things like that, player removals, all that. So as far as this is concerned, we do play a little bit of a role in it, but at this point right now, we just haven't. We're basically just setting up for next year to at least have that structure to make it a little easier for people to kind of see how things are ruled, what the right kind of rulings can be for certain situations, and just to have a little bit of an easier transition for those people to learn how we do what we do.
Is there any impact of a new release coming out? Obviously from year to year, you guys have to deal with this, but for anybody who plays this game, is there any impact on the league site and what you guys do and what what management does in trying to get folks to to properly do what they need to do as a GM and AGM? Does it make any difference for a new release, or is it just pretty standard stuff no matter what release we're in?
Yeah, it's all par for the course. You could take these rules and slot them in for the game 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's all pretty much the same. What you do see a change in is sign-up numbers. You'll always see a huge flux in the first season. Middle season's all right, and summer numbers are always a little bit weak.
Okay.
That's really the only change that you see season to season and specifically game to game.
What do you guys? We're gonna wrap it up here, and so I just want to talk about what's coming up for next season. Obviously, we mentioned a little bit about the CHL and how that's been nice to have on the PSN side, and there are a lot of players who are sitting on training camp rosters who benefit from there being more teams in the CHL, and so we need more management and there. What would you, if you're going to give a couple of quick tips, a top 3 tips to anybody who wants to be an owner or GM in the CHL, and we'll start with you, Ted. What are the top 3 things that you would tell somebody who wants to get involved? What do they need to keep in mind if they want to be part of management in the CHL?
Well, I think number 1 is commitment. You got to be committed to playing this league and actually take it seriously. You can't be too blasé about it and just be whatever and think that you can actually manage a team and get a competitive team on ice. You really need to have that commitment, number 1. You definitely have to have the communication with the people, like I mentioned before. You have to be willing to be able to, at least try to reach out to everybody and know. And I guess maybe the third thing would be, I guess just make sure you keep it a game and have fun with it. I mean, I'm sure I could probably think of something better after, but ultimately it's a big commitment and you have to be prepared for it. But know that if you do get into that kind of involvement, you can make your schedule. But if you're making your schedule, as fun as that can be, it's certainly difficult because you have to work with the schedules of other people, and one thing that can get in the way is the conflicts of everybody's availability. So just you have to be structured, you have to be available yourself, you have to be committed, and just want to win, and definitely a team player, number 1, I think, as well. I think the right kind of personality really makes a big difference with having a team that will function smoothly, because I think ultimately if you treat everybody equally and respectfully, you'll have a better time than butting heads with people. So it's something that so that everybody will have a much more more people will have a better chance to play overall.
Go ahead, Rob.
Throw some advice to a guy who wants to be a CHL owner: find a good GM, find the best GM. Not just a good player, because you do get to take your GM for free, right? As the owner and the GM who get to come along before the season starts, who bypass bidding.
Right.
Find a guy who's going to be able to put in the time, who's everything that Dead Soul just described, right? He's going to be able to put in the time, who's I don't even know, someone whose life will allow them to just dump time and ooze personality. There's a guy and I don't know anything about this guy. This Windsor Spitfires GM. His name is Cal Hockey. I don't know how this guy does it. The Windsor Spitfires dead last in the CHL. You can't get any lower. Every night this guy puts out lines, he gets his guys out. He is amazing. He is my hero. He is the best GM in the league. I don't care what anyone else is doing, what other kind of numbers are putting up. When you got a team who goes 9-0 and then 10-0 in a night, and then comes back for their third game tomorrow, that's a GM.
Right.
That's the kind of guy you want on your team. You know what?
Sure.
And not only that, he seems to have a great understanding of the rules. He's just the best. I'm just moonstruck with him.
But as you say with rules, I mean, just to point that out too, again, just if you're interested in any kind of involvement like that with management, we definitely ask to please read those rules a couple of times for sure, and know that you just make sure you feel comfortable and understand them so that you can explain them to other people, and definitely have the people that come into your organization, especially management, to also follow suit, and it makes things so much easier for everybody in the league, and ultimately it will help to avoid confrontations and situations later that might cost you some games.
Well, I think you guys have touched on everything. I think we've gotten through most of the stuff that we wanted to talk about. And obviously, folks, if you've got questions at all, and I might pull up these guys' emails a little bit, but you can find Dead Soul Rising and Birthing Machine on obviously the LG website. And obviously they spent an hour here talking to us tonight, and I'm sure they're more than happy to try and answer your questions as you have them, guys. Again, thanks a lot for joining me tonight, and I'm sure that we'll talk again somewhere down the road. But good luck with everything you're going to have to deal with at the end of the season and into the playoffs, because I'm sure this is when it really gets hairy for you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks very much for having us.
Thanks, Sibs.
That's it for the show tonight. I am TSibs as usual, and this was A Bog's Life right here on LeagueGaming.com and the YouTube channel. We've got a show coming up this weekend that will be about the weekly show for the LG AHL called LG Hockey Hotline. That'll be this weekend, and I believe we're going to have a different time. It'll be this Sunday. But we will get that out to everyone soon and let you know what's going on. Again, thanks a lot for joining us tonight, everyone. TSibs saying so long and good luck with Week 9 next week.